Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 Season 28 Patch 275 Necromancer build guide. This guide is for the Masquerade of the Burning Carnival Bone Spear build. This build is being buffed this patch to return it to its former glory, and it's also the starter set for Season 28. Launching Bone Spears is tons of fun, and while this isn't the absolute best Necromancer build, it's very high up there now thanks to the buffs, and it makes for a really good farming build. And then if you want to move on to the top pushing build for Necromancer, you can always then move on to the Tragwool Blood Nova build. We had a Season 27 video for that build. It's the same thing, you can still follow that guide. But when it comes to just farming content, it's going to be tough to beat the Masquerade set. The gameplay footage you're seeing in the background was recorded by top player Wudijo, and you can follow along with the written version of this guide on maxroll.gg. In this video, we're going to cover the gear, the skills, and the playstyle that you want to rock a Bone Spear Necro. So this build obviously revolves around the Masquerade set. The two-piece bonus, Simulacrums, no longer take damage, gain all runes, and its cooldown is refreshed when you die. So this build is incredibly dependent on Simulacrums, and you'll want to keep them up 100% of the time, and we'll tell you how to do that in just a moment here. But first, the four-piece bonus, while you have a Simulacrum, damage is reduced by 50%. Damage you take is split with your Simulacrum as well. This is going to translate into an 83% damage reduction. If we don't have Simulacrum out, we are going to instantly implode. Then the six-piece Bone Spear cast by you and your Simulacrum deals, it's saying 6,000, but for Season 28, that's getting buffed to 9,000. And again, for Season 28, your Simulacrums are going to deal triple this bonus. This was a bonus that was removed a couple seasons ago because it was so strong, but now they're bringing back this buff. So you are the director of the Bone Spear Orchestra. You're launching Bone Spears, but it's going to be your Simulacrums that are going to be dealing the majority of the damage. Now, given how important it is to have Simulacrum out all the time, we need Haunted Visions for this build. In fact, someone argued this build doesn't work at all without the Haunted Visions amulet. Simulacrum now drains 1% of your max life every second, and lasts forever. They can now duplicate Grim Scythe instead of Skeletal Mage. Now, 1% of your life every second, that means after 30 seconds, that's about a third of your life gone. Your potion has a 30-second cooldown and restores 60% of your life, so even without any other means of restoring life, you should be able to maintain this simply with your potion. Another essential item for this build, Maltorius's Petrified Spike. This is a two-handed scythe. Bone Spear now costs 40 essence and deals 700% increased damage. Bone Spear typically costs 20 essence, so this is doubling the cost, but in order to deal 8 times the damage, so it's worth it. Another key item, Gelmindor's Marrow Guards. This is a bracer. Bone Spears cast from Simulacrums deal 400% increased damage. Then some other multipliers are going to work in. The Scythe of the Cycle, one-handed scythe. Your secondary skills, like Bone Spear, deal up to 400% increased damage while Bone Armor is active, but reduce the remaining duration of Bone Armor by 4 seconds. This means we'll have to pop Bone Armor quite often, but the damage buff from this is worth it. This means we're going to put Maltorius's Petrified Spike in the cube, and we will equip the Scythe of the Cycle. For our offhand, we're going to go with the Lost Time Phylactery. This isn't an essential item, but it is useful for faster move speed. The priority here, however, is getting an offhand, a Phylactery specifically, with the correct stats over a Lost Time specifically. With a Lost Time, your cold skills reduce the movement speed of enemies, and your movement speed is increased by 10% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 5 times for 50% faster move speed. This becomes more important for speed content, but still not an essential buff. Another excellent Necromancer damage multiplier, Crispin's Sentence. You deal up to double damage against slowed enemies, or triple this bonus against enemies afflicted by any other type of control impairing effect. You see Crispin's in almost every Necromancer build because it is so powerful. The Necromancer is the one class that has options that rival the convention of elements, but will still work in a convention of elements. This gives you 200% increased damage to a single element for 4 seconds, and it's going to rotate through your different elements, so you have a window of time where you are dealing a huge amount of increased damage. If you're feeling particularly squishy, however, and you're playing solo, you can always wear a unity ring instead. This requires that you put one on yourself, one on your follower. You give your follower the token that makes him invulnerable, and this has the effect of doubling your toughness. Another item will work in the Dainty's Binding Belt. You gain an additional 50% damage reduction when there's an enemy afflicted by any of your curses. This is going to be another critical part of our defense. Then lastly, we want to work a 3-piece set into this build. To do that, we're going to need a Ring of Royal Grandeur. This reduces the number of items needed for set bonuses by 1. You're going to put this ring in your cube, and you cannot get this item via blood shards or world drops. You're going to get them via Act 1 bounty bags. Then you're going to get either the Oghild set or the Guardian set. If you're under about 2,000 to 2,500 Paragon, stick with Guardians. If you get past that point, then you go to Oghilds. Why? Guardians 2-piece. Your melee damage reduction is increased by 1% per 1,000 base vitality from equipped items. Your missile damage reduction is increased by 1% per 1,000 base strength, dex, or intelligence from equipped items depending on your class. For a necro, that's intelligence. Then the 3-piece. You gain an additional 100% of your base strength, dex, intelligence, and vitality attributes from equipped items. At low Paragon, this is a huge bonus. It's not doubling stats you get from Paragon or from augments, so the deeper into a season you go, the more of your attributes are coming from augments and Paragon, the less effective Guardians is. But early season, Guardians is doing the work of hundreds and thousands of Paragon points. So your Gelmandor's Marrowguard's bracers, those go in the cube. Then you're equipping the set bracer of Guardians or Oghilds. And then if you're using Guardians, you're going to put in the helmet. If you're doing Oghilds, it's going to be the bracer and the shoulder. What does Oghilds do? 2-piece. Reduces damage taken by 15%, increases damage dealt by 30%. 3-piece. Reduces damage from elites by 30%, increases damage against elites by 30%. Again though, only make the switch between 2,000 and 2,500 Paragon. Now I'll go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, but first a look at the skills. We're going to take Bone Spear, Blighted Marrow. Bone Spear is a long-range sniping skill, and Blighted Marrow increases the damage by 15% for each enemy the Bone Spear passes through. So for pushing Greater Rifts, this will be your highest DPS option. You position yourself to try to line up enemies, stay at the end of the screen, and then launch your Bone Spear to try to go through to pierce as many enemies as possible to build up as much damage as possible. If you want to get real nitty-gritty with the strategy, you want to get a bunch of trash monsters in front of an elite so that you're dealing your max damage against the elite at the end of the line. Next, we're going to take Grim Scythe, Frost Scythe. This is to generate essence, and each enemy hit increases your attack speed by 1% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 15 times for a 15% attack speed increase. This is going to be particularly important to stack right before we get into our rotation, our Convention of Elements window. During those 4 seconds, you want to be blasting all of the Bone Spears that you possibly can. Next, you're going to take Simulacrum. The rune doesn't matter because you already have the benefit of every rune. So Simulacrum by itself creates a duplicate of yourself made of blood that will duplicate your secondary skills. It normally lasts 15 seconds, but now it's lasting forever thanks to our Haunted Visions. The Cursed Form rune makes your curses now apply all 3 curses. It won't apply every rune, so you're still picking a specific rune, but again, you're going to get the base effect of all 3 curses every time one of your curses is applied. Reservoir will double our maximum essence. Self-sacrifice makes it such that if you would die while a simulacrum is active, instead, one of those simulacrum is destroyed and you are fully healed. Blood Debt will reduce the life cost for skills by 75%. And Blood and Bone now gives us a second simulacrum, one made of bone. Next, we'll take Bone Armor Dislocation. Bone Armor by itself gives us a nice little buff. You want to get your full 10 stacks. When you trigger it, it affects nearby enemies. It can affect up to 10 enemies, giving you up to 10 stacks. And for every stack, you gain 3% damage reduction, for a max of 30% damage reduction. This will last for 60 seconds. However, with our Scythe of the Cycle, every Bone Spear that we launch will reduce that by 4 seconds. we take the Dislocation rune because that's going to stun enemies for 2 seconds, which will trigger the maximum buff from our Crisbin sentence. So you want to be popping bone armor right before you go into your Convention of Elements rotation. So you Grim Scythe up to your full stack of Grim Scythe and up to your max essence. Then right before you go into Poison rotation, you pop bone armor. This refreshes your bone armor so that you have it last throughout those 4 seconds. It also stuns for 2 seconds enemies, giving you 2 seconds of full Crisbin's buff as you blast with your bone spear. Next, we'll take Blood Rush Metabolism. This is for mobility. The Metabolism rune gives us an extra charge on Blood Rush. Then lastly, we're going to take a Curse. Remember, we're getting the base effect of all 3. The typical option here would be Decrepify, Wither. Decrepify by itself reduces enemy damage by 30%, and with the Wither Curse, that moves up to 40%. However, in Season 28, we have the Altar of Rites. Once we get final patch notes, I'll have a video fully describing the Altar of Rites. Before that, you can check out this video here with the introduction to it. But this is basically a new skill tree that you're going to earn your way through, and there are 3 potion effects that you can unlock. Now, currently, before final patch notes, one of these potions is insanely powerful. So spamming your potion as often as possible is advantageous. And there is a rune on Leech, currently, again, assuming this doesn't get nerfed, that will reduce the cooldown of your potion by 1 second every time a cursed enemy dies. So, if you're playing Season 28, and the Blood Flask rune on Leech still operates the way we just described, and the potion effects in the Altar of Rites are still very strong, then go for this. Otherwise, stick with Decrepify, Wither. For our passives, we're going to take Bone Prison. This gives Bone Spear a 30% chance to trap enemies in a Bone Prison, which will trigger our Crisbin sentence. Next, we'll take Stand Alone. This gives us 100% increased armor, reduced by 10% for each active minion. This will give us a nice chunk of toughness. Next, we'll take Spreading Malediction. You get a 1% damage bonus for each enemy afflicted by one of your curses. Because of this, we want to have as many enemies on screen cursed as possible. Then lastly, if you want an extra life, you can go with Final Service. Gives you a nice cheat death. Otherwise, if you want more damage, you can go with Serration. This will make your Bone Spear deal 1% increased damage for every 1.5 yards from you, up to a max of 20% additional damage. For your legendary gems, you'll get a Bane of the Trapped. This increases damage against crowd-controlled enemies, synergizes well with our whole strategy with the Crisbin sentence. Next, we'll take a Zaeith's Stone of Vengeance. The further away an enemy is from you, the more damage it deal. We're a sniper with this build, so keep enemies at the edge of your screen. Now, this might seem contradictory with the Grim Scythe. We need to be meleeing enemies sometimes. Well, especially against a Rift Guardian. Grim Scythe, Grim Scythe, Grim Scythe, then right before you're ready to get into your Convention rotation and unleash the Bone Spears, then you're going to Blood Rush to the edge of the screen and then start sniping. Then lastly, for Greater Rift pushing, you want a Bane of the Stricken. 25% more damage against Rift Guardians, and you get a stacking damage buff against an enemy. The more you hit an enemy, the more increased damage you deal to that enemy. Bane of the Stricken really is for when it's taking you very long to complete a Greater Rift. For faster content, you'll use a Bane of the Powerful instead. 20% more damage after killing an elite pack, and 15% more damage against elites, 15% less damage taken from elites. As for exactly what you want on every piece of gear. On your shoulders, Intelligence, Vitality, cooldown reduction, area damage. For your helm, Intelligence, crit chance, bone spear damage, and an amethyst for more life. For your amulet, crit chance, crit damage, poison damage. For your chest, Intelligence, Vitality, armor. For the gems that you're putting in your chest and pants, if you want more damage, you go with Topaz for intelligence. If you want more toughness, either ruby or emerald for armor. Your gloves, Intelligence, crit chance, crit damage, area damage. Your bracer, Intelligence, Vitality, crit chance, poison damage. Your belt, Intelligence, Vitality, life percent, and armor. Your pants, Intelligence, Vitality, armor. Boots, Intelligence, Vitality, armor, bone spear damage. On your rings, for your convention, crit chance, crit damage, area damage. On your Crisbin sentence, crit chance, crit damage, attack speed. Your weapon, percent damage, intelligence, attack speed. Your offhand, Intelligence, crit chance, area damage, bone spear damage. Now I'll go over some changes you can make to this build for doing speed Greater Rifts. As we just mentioned, first off, Bane of the Stricken becomes a Bane of the Powerful. But on top of that, we want to work in the Stewart's Greaves boots. You gain 100% increased move speed for 10 seconds after using Blood Rush. That means we can't have Gelmandors in the cube anymore, so we're going to equip it. That means we can't have Aughills or Guardians anymore. So we'll equip the full 6-piece set of Masquerade, meaning we no longer need a Ring of Royal Grandeur, so we're going to get the Brig's Wrath Ring. Uncursed enemies are pulled to the target location when a curse is applied to them. So now you're going to be laying down curses on enemies to group them together. We're going to change our rune on Bone Spear to Shatter. With this move, we're sacrificing damage for area damage. Now instead of piercing, the Bone Spear is going to explode against the first enemy it hits and deal damage in an area. This synergizes well with our Brig's Wrath. Group them up, and then lob that grenade. We're going to drop Grim Scythe. We're going to have no generator at all, in fact. Instead, we'll take Devour Voracious. We're now relying on killing enemies to devour their corpses to restore essence. And the Voracious rune will reduce all essence costs by 2% for each corpse consumed for 5 seconds. Basically, once this build gets going, you need to keep the momentum up, keep killing monsters in order to not run out of Bone Spears. To help with that, we're going to swap out the Bone Prison passive with Dark Reaping. While using a Scythe, which we are, gain 2% essence and life per kill. We can also afford to drop the damage buff from Spreading Malediction, and instead take Fueled by Death. Consuming a corpse increases your movement speed by 3% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 10 times for 30% more move speed. Now, if you want to go super speed turbo mode for, let's say, just regular speed rifts, hold on to that Grim Scythe, Frost Scythe, because we want to be able to build that movement speed bonus with a lost time. You're going to take the Teeth rune on Bone Spear. This turns it into a shotgun spread. This has the biggest area of effect. So between Teeth, Shatter, and Blighted Marrow, we're going from most damage to most area, with Shatter somewhere in between. Change out the rune on Bone Armor for Harvest of Anguish. That's going to drop the stun that's going to trigger Crisbins, but instead we're going to get 1% move speed for every enemy hit. We want to be going blitzingly fast. Because of that, we're keeping the Bone Prison passive so that can still trigger our Crisbins. We no longer need a Brig's Wrath because Teeth is hitting everything everywhere. So we'll bring back a Ring of Royal Grandeur, and we're going to work 2 pieces of the Captain Crimson set into the build. 2-piece gives us some life per second, 20% cooldown reduction, and 20% resource cost reduction. 3-piece makes us deal more damage based on how much cooldown we have, and make us take less damage based on how much resource cost reduction we have. The extra cooldown will help us Blood Rush along more, and we'll take the Devouring Aura rune on Devour, so that we don't have to stop to actually cast Devour. It's just gonna zip up everything around us. Now, for our follower, we're gonna want the Scoundrel. It's the highest DPS option. We'll give him the Skeleton Key so that he never dies. For his skills, don't pick either Crippling Shot or Powered Shot. Those apply crowd controls. We want to be applying our own crowd controls when we want to be. Enemies build up crowd control immunity, so we don't want to waste any crowd controls with his that won't be hitting during our windows. That said, if you have already selected one of the two, you're screwed. There's no way to unselect one. So in that case, go for Powered Shot just because it has the longer cooldown. Next, we want to take Anatomy for a crit chance buff. Next, we'll take Piercing Shot for another 10% increased damage. And lastly, we'll take Knight's Veil for a huge crit chance buff. For his gear, we want to prioritize items that benefit us directly. The Flavor of Time emanates to us, makes pile-on effects last twice as long. So powerful. Nemesis Bracers. Shrines will spawn an enemy champion, emanates to us. When we click a shrine, champions will spawn. We want to blitz down those champions in order to progress through a rift faster. Oculus Ring. When an enemy dies, there's a chance for a golden pool to appear on the ground, stand in it, and almost double your damage. Unity Ring, if you're going to equip a Unity Ring as well. As we explained previously, this will double your toughness. Then give him some Ice Climbers to make him immune to freeze and immobilize effects. This way he's always helping us. And outside of that, it's not super important, but you want to really blast as much dexterity as you can on his gear, because all of his abilities scale with dexterity, and then your second priority is more attack speed. For your Paragon Points, you want to max out your move speed, then you want to max out your essence, just so that you have a lot of essence to be blasting with Bone Spear during your convention rotation. Then for Vitality, this is a personal preference, but put as much into Vitality until you feel comfortable with your survivability. We recommend getting about 750,000 life total, then dump everything into Intelligence. For offense, attack speed, then crit damage and crit chance, maintaining a global 10-to-1 ratio between the two, then cooldown reduction. For defense, armor, life percent, all resist, life regen, and utility, area damage, resource cost reduction, life per hit, and pickup radius. And that's going to wrap up this guide. But do stay tuned for more Season 28 guides, including a tier list with the best builds for Season 28, and a guide to the Altar of Rites. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon, and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.